With this blues soloing guitar lesson, we'll show how to solo with open E blues riffs, along with box pattern diagrams, 6 new riffs, and several rhythm tracks to jam along to. We'll cover it all with the step-by-step approach. For most guitarists, the first time they learn to play a blues scale, it's usually with a standard box pattern along the 5th fret position, which is the key of A. What I mean by a standard box pattern, it's either the pentatonic minor box pattern or the blues scale or blues box pattern, which has an added note. And what we did with previous lessons or levels is once we had that box pattern down, we then learned to shift the pattern along the fretboard to play in different keys. Knowing the chromatic scale, the notes on the bottom string, with A being on the 5th fret, you simply shift up 1 fret, you're playing blues in A sharp, also known as B flat. Shift up another fret, you're playing blues in B. After that, the next step is to learn some standard riffs and some blues technique. So say, for example, in the key of A, applying some bending, some vibrato, passing tones, hammer-ons, pull-offs. All of those can be applied usually within a standard box pattern that works for 11 out of the 12 keys. What I mean is if we're talking between the open position and the 12th fret, you can do the same maneuvering with 11 out of 12 keys except for the key of E. And what we're going to do with this lesson is show you the slight variations you need to apply when soloing in open E. Now, if we were to take the standard pentatonic minor box pattern in A and shift to E, we would shift down to the open fret position. And since the E pentatonic minor box pattern along the open position includes open strings, that's going to free up the stronger fingers, the 1, 2, and 3 fingers, to apply slight variations to bending, vibrato, and other techniques. And before we get into applying these techniques to open E blues riffs, step 1 is to get acclimated to the pentatonic minor box pattern in E. And how we go about that is we're going to start here just with an ascending and descending riff here. And if we follow the tab, we go 0, 3, and then again we focus on our 1 finger now. 0, 2, next string 0, 2, next string 0, 2, 0, 3, and then 0, 3, 0. We want to end on that 0, or that top string open. We want to end on the root note. So a lot of people, when they play an ascending pattern like I just did, they stop on that note, but you actually want to land on that root note. That helps for phrasing. Let's do that ascending pattern again, a little bit faster. 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 3, 0. The next, we would play the riff in descending order. We'll start with that E root note again, and then immediately go down to the 2nd string, 3, 0 on that string, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0. Now, ultimately, you may switch up your fingers for those top strings, but you definitely want to use your 2 finger for the bottom string on the 3rd fret. That's going to help for some speedy riffs there. And again, we're starting off with the 2 finger. That's not necessarily written in stone. We will switch it up depending on the type of riff you're playing. With this lesson, we're not only going to cover 6 open E blues riffs, we're also going to play the riffs along with some backing rhythm tracks. And that way you can hear how the riffs sound or harmonize when played along with the backing rhythm. And the riffs with previous lessons were initially introduced in the key of A. So if you follow the blues soloing playlist, previous lessons, these riffs will be familiar to you. And if you haven't, we're still going to break down how to play each riff note for note. So with that, we're going to start with the riff that I referred to as the blues riff. And when we learned it in A, here's how it sounded. I may notice there's some bending technique involved. And again, the whole point in this lesson is if we're dealing with open E blues, we have to make adjustments with the fingers. And depending on the riff, that'll be based on whether we use our 1 finger or our 2nd finger or our 2nd or 3rd finger for the top strings. In this case, if you note that this blues riff, the blues riff, starts with a really strong bend with multiple fingers. Well, this bend is, you want to do it with the 1, 2, and 3 fingers when you're playing every other key except open E. But when you're playing in open E, this first finger actually makes it easier to do the bend. When you're shifting down here, using your 2 and 3 fingers just doesn't quite work as well. We're going to use our 1 and 2 fingers for the bend. And the blues riff is really only 3 steps. Step 1 is just the bend by itself. Now it's going to be a little bit, I'm on an acoustic guitar, on electric it'll be easier to hit that right pitch. But it starts with that bend with your 1 and 2 fingers. Now when we originally did the riff in A, step 2 is just flattening your finger across the top 2 strings, part of that pentatonic minor box pattern. We're still in the pentatonic minor box pattern open E, but this time all we have to do is just drag across the 2 open strings. So back to step 1, strong bend. Step 2, drag across the strings. Now I'm going to use my 3rd finger for this particular riff as we descend down the box pattern. That's going to be step 3. And descending down the box pattern, here's what I mean. 3, 0. I'm going to use the middle finger, 2, 0, and then middle finger again as we go down to the 4th string, 2nd fret. Why? We want multiple fingers for vibrato on that last note. It gives you better sustain and better tone. Let's put it all together. Again, there's 3 steps to the blues riff. Step 1, strong bend. Step 2, drag across, 0, 0. Then descend down the scale, 3, 0, 2, 0, 2, 2. Add vibrato on that second note, second root note actually, the last note. Let's play it 2 more times. I'll gradually speed it up. Next we'll do the bend and release riff, which when we learned it in A sounded like this. Again, we've got a strong bend involved, but also the added technique here is the release bend. We've got the bend and then the sustained release. And again, shifting down to E, we need to make an adjustment with the fingers. Again, we're going to use the 1, 2 and fingers for bending in the open position, the open E position. We're going to start with the root note, the 4th string, 2nd fret E. Then open string, next string, 3rd string will be open, so, and then 2nd fret on that 3rd string, so boom, bum, bum. And now we've got the bend and release, and for open E, I'm going to recommend the 1 and 2 fingers together. Let's do that again. It's going to be pretty tricky if you haven't played a lot of acoustic, easier on electric. Let's piece it together from the beginning. And then releasing a little vibrato on that E root note. Let's play the riff 3 times. We'll gradually build up the speed. Here we go. One more. Now, even though we're going to cover 6 new riffs with this lesson, it's a good idea at this point to set a good foundation with the 2 riffs we already know. And how we're going to do that is we're going to practice now combining the first 2 riffs together, and then we're going to practice the combined riffs along with our first backing rhythm track. So one thing to point out with the open E blues riffs is we start with the blues riff. What I want to point out is that last note of that riff ends up being the first note of the bend and release riff. So with that, we'll rehearse this combined riff, the two riffs combined. We'll do it 3 times in a row, gradually build up the speed. Here we go with the first one. 1, 2, ready, go. Here we go a little faster. 1, 2, ready, go. And a little faster. 1, 2, 3, go. Now by this point, we should have a good foundation now, have these combined riffs memorized. And what we're going to do with the next clip is there'll be a backing rhythm track that will go for 14 bars. There'll be a blues shuffle. And why I'm mentioning 14 bars is that you're going to be able to play this combined riff a total of 4 times. And as far as timing goes, you don't have to worry about timing at this point. The objective is just to hear how these riffs sound with a backing rhythm. Timing is important, but at this point you just want to sort of survive playing the riffs correct and with clarity. And so what we're going to do is in the next clip, there will be a second guitar. It'll be myself playing the riffs. That'll be your guide track to follow. So if you're able to essentially just keep up with the next clip. We're not asking you to be creative or anything or be Jimi Hendrix and go fast. Just see if you can keep up and follow the guide solo, and then you'll be ready for the next challenge. The next riff, we're going to apply some hammer and pull-off techniques to an open E blues riff, and we can use our first finger in this case to fret the 3rd fret. And here's a preview of how the riff will sound. In the hammer pull-off combo, you're only going to pluck the string once, the top string open 1 time, but then the next 2 notes are sounded by the hammer and the release, or the pull-off. So we have, and that's why it's indicated with the 0-3-0. The curve over those 3 notes indicates that the 2 notes are going to be hammered. And we're going to play that 3 consecutive times. And then we're going to end by phrasing on that root note. The open top string, or the first string open, is E. So let's play that riff a few times. 1, 2, ready, go. One, 2, ready, go. And one more. 1, 2, ready, go. Riff 4 will be a descending riff. We're going to do a variation of simply going down the box pattern. Here's how the riff will sound. In this case, I'm going to use the 2 finger to fret the 3rd fret on the top 2 strings. 0, 3, 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, shifting to the 2 finger again with the 1 finger together for that vibrato to end the riff. Let's play it 3 times in a row. 1, 2, ready, go. One, 2, ready, go. and one more. 1, 2, ready, go. In the next upcoming clip, there'll be another backing track, but this time we will play all 4 riffs we've covered together. So a good idea now is to work on practicing the combination or the running order of the riffs. And here we go from the beginning, starting with the blues riff, followed by the bend and release riff, the hammer pull-off riff, and then the descending riff. Let's put together that running order one more time. Here we go from the top. Now with the next rhythm track, it'll be the same progression as the first rhythm track, but this time it won't be repeating so much. It'll actually be this 4 riff sequence. You'll be able to play it through 2 times. Now, passing tones are notes that are not part of the pentatonic minor scale, but you can add them into a solo to get a certain sort of off-center kind of feel. When we did it in A originally, with the A pentatonic minor box pattern, the passing tones were on the 5th, 4th, and the 3rd string. So in between that whole step between the 1 and 3 fingers, you throw in the middle finger to get that added passing tone. Now shifting to open E, that would mean including the open string. So with the passing tone riff in open E, it would be 0, 1, 2, and we're going to use our 1 and 2 fingers to fret the 2 notes, not the first one. So 0, 1, 2 on that 5th string, 0, 1, 2 on the 4th string, on the 3rd string. Whoops. And there's the root note. So with that in mind, here's a riff we're going to do. What we're doing is adding a hammer effect, a double hammer on the 5th string, 0, 1, 2. So we only pluck that 5th string once, hammer the next 2 notes, 0, 1, 2. And then after that, we go to the 4th string, and that's part of that little sequence here. Dun, dun. And then that root note to end it. So we do this particular sequence or riff 3 times, and then that root note. Let's do that again. Next, we're going to apply double stops to open E riffs. Usually when you play a double stop in any other key, for example A, when it comes to the top 2 strings, you may be flattening your first finger for a lot of double stops. But with open E, we have the open strings. Pretty easy to play at least that kind of double stop. But the riff we're going to do, we're going to start off with a hammer on the 2nd string. We're going to go 0, 3, and then dun, 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 just strumming those top 2 strings open. going to do that 3 times. And then we end with just a sustained double stop. And one more. On the next upcoming clip, we will play all 6 riffs we've covered along with a backing rhythm track. So we want to work out the running order of those 6 riffs, combining them all together. In addition to playing the 6 riffs in the running order, the way the timing works out with the next track is we do have time for another riff. So we're going to end everything after we play all 6 with repeating the descending riff. And then something you may have noted that I didn't bring up, I noticed, is that at the end of each of these jams, I did play a root note ending, which is just the top string open. So you have the option to do that as well. It's good to get used to playing harmonized endings. In other words, playing that root note as the last chord is being played. But let's put it all together now. We're going to go through all 6 riffs in their chronological order. We're going to add the descending riff, and let's piece it together. Let's rehearse it right now. Starting with the blues riff. 1, 2, ready, go. Then the bend and release. Hammer pull off. Descending riff. The passing tones riff. And then the double stops riff. And then we end with the descending riff. And then the option, playing the root note. If we're rehearsing, let's do it one more time. Get a good foundation. Here we go from the top. 1, 2, ready, go. One note before we jump into that track, the new passing tones riff, you don't have to rush on that one. That's actually going to extend over 4 bars. Just to let you know as you're playing along, won't be a need to rush that riff. But with that, again, the objective, let's see if you can just simply keep up with these 6 riffs. And if you can do that with the next clip, then we're going to throw in and show you how to do some variations with these riffs. This lesson will conclude with a much longer backing rhythm track that's going to allow you to throw in some variations to these 6 riffs. Now, being a little bit creative means there will be no guide track. You'll just be playing on your own. Now, since you just learned these riffs, asking you to be creative with them is asking a bit much. In other words, being able to improvise these riffs is still something that's a little bit down the road. So what is that in-between point between copying a riff verbatim and improvisation? Well, that's what we're going to do in the next upcoming clips. We're going to take some steps, give you some ideas on how to start improvising with the riffs you just learned. A good first step to break out of the rut of repeating the same combination of riffs is to rearrange the running order of the riffs in which you've learned them. The most basic example being the first two riffs we learned, the blues riff, followed by the bend and release riff. Even though that's a great combination, they sound good played in that running order. You don't want to fall into the rut where that's ingrained in your muscle memory too much. So how to break out of that rut is to reverse the order. And in other words, what if we were to start with the bend and release riff and then just shifting the fingers over for the blues riff. Now we've covered 6 open E blues riffs with this lesson. I just reviewed a way to reverse the running order of 2. Remember, we originally had 6 riffs, and if we actually numbered the riffs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, how many options do you have? How many different combinations could you do with those 6 riffs? Well, this involves math. I guess back in junior high, I think it's factorial. The amount of options you have with 6 riffs or combinations would be 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. There's 720 potential combinations you could play by mixing and matching the running order of riffs you learn. So if that's not enough to keep you busy, I don't know what is, but that's one thing you can do on your own, is working out different combinations to break out of that rut of repeating the same combination of riffs. With variations, you take riffs that you've already learned and you slightly alter the riff by a few notes. One example being the bend and release riff. One variation idea you could apply to that is maybe throwing in a couple extra bends. How about the hammer pull-off riff? Well, we could do the same approach on the second string, or include a riff on the second string with that. Let's do that one again. So the whole point is, take something and just alter it by a couple of notes, and again that'll push you out of the rut of constantly repeating the same riff over and over. And so one suggestion is take these 6 riffs and try out your own variations. Now, even though the focus of this lesson is on open E blues riffs, remember on guitar everything repeats every 12 frets. So you can actually shift E blues up to the 12th fret position as well. You may have an electric guitar, you may have an acoustic with a cutaway, or if you've been playing long enough, you can squeeze your fingers up there and pull off some E blues riffs along the 12th fret position as well. Again, we primarily focused on the open riffs, but just to give you another option when jamming along with the rhythm track is shifting patterns, the same pattern actually, playing E blues along the 12th fret. Now, in trying out variations, you still want to apply good phrasing technique. In other words, you want to focus on the E root notes since we're playing riffs in E. Everything we did in this lesson, even from the box pattern in ascending order, there was a focus on phrasing or a root note focus. We began with an E root note, that bottom string open, and we ended with the E root note. So even playing the box patterns, it's important to have that root note focus. That way you can hear the intended mood of the scale. The bend and release riff, that starts on another E root note here on the 4th string 2nd fret. It begins on the E root note and it ends on one. The blues riff doesn't start on an E root note, but that also ends on one. So it's not a rule that you have to do that on every riff, but if you do focus on this phrasing technique, focusing on the root note, down the road your solos won't sound so rambling. There'll be like sort of proper punctuation to a solo, and that helps you sound a little bit more cohesive when jamming along with the backing rhythm. Now, compared to the initial 6 riffs we learned, we now have a lot more options when it comes to trying out variations. So with this next rhythm track, we're going to extend it a bit. It's going to go for 3 full verses. It'll give you plenty of time to try out variations. And the key is to just have a carefree approach, try out things, because what will happen, what pushes you to that next level of improvisation is something called a happy accident. What I mean by that is you're going to play a random riff or random variation at some point in the progression, and it's going to sound good at that moment. It's not planned, but it works really well. And that's the idea on how to eventually improvise with guitar is you try out variations and just jam along. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, but eventually things start to land in place the more you play. Once you have this lesson down, the next step is to go outside of the standard box pattern so you can start soloing on other parts of the fretboard. And you can check out my Blues Soloing Guitar Lessons playlist for those lessons. And for future releases, you can also subscribe to Paluzzi Guitar.